Hello. Welcome back to Cocktails and Cliff Notes. I'm your host, Mayson, and today we're talking about the three ancient sisters who wove the destiny of every mortal and every god. This is the story of the Fates. But before we do that, let's mix up a little beverage to go with our story. Today, we're just doing a little hot chocolate to keep us cozy this winter. So, once we get that mixed up and we have our drinks, we can really talk. This is going to be a really simple drink today. I'm not even going to add alcohol because I really just wanted something kind of warm. I always use some warm milk for my hot chocolate. I just feel like it tastes better. And then we're just going to use a little hot chocolate mix. And I will be the first to acknowledge that I accidentally got K cups instead of the packet, but it's the same thing and it still works. Then I'm adding an excessive amount of marshmallows. Let's add one of these little chocolate hazelnuts, delightful little sticks, whatever these are. And there we go. Just a cozy, very basic hot chocolate to keep us warm. Now that we have our drinks, let's get into our story today. Now, in Greek mythology, even the gods had their limits at times. Zeus could command the thunder, and then Poseidon obviously ruled the seas. Athena, she crafted strategies for both kings and heroes. But above them all, silent, very patient, unchanging were the fates. So, we're just going to step into the shadowed realm where life is measured by a thread and cut with a single decisive snip. Now, this is the story of the Moirai, which is the Fates. Their names were Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. Now, these were the weavers of destiny. Now, in the beginning, and this is before Olympus had even crowned its kings and queens. This is before Zeus took the throne. This is before mortals even walked the earth. There were the Moirai, or the Fates. Now, they were born of Nyx, which were the primordial goddesses of night, or in some traditions, they were Ananke, which was basically the force of necessity itself. Now, the Fates were not merely divine beings, they were the laws of the universe. So, really, no one created them, and definitely no one commanded them. And not even Zeus could override them. I mean, he might bargain with them, but he could never really defy them. And if they decided that his bargaining was not working, they could override him. So, Clotho, surely not saying that right. Probably not going to say any of their names correctly, but we're going to do the Oklahoma accent version of their names, if you will. So Clotho, she was the spinner. Now, she was the youngest and she was very gentle faced, but she was very resolute. And she actually carried the spindle, and from it, she spun the thread of life. And so when a child took its first breath, Clotho set the thread in motion. So then there was Lachesis. Again, Oklahoma version. But Lachesis, she was the measurer of the thread. Now, she was very calm and she was very methodical and she was unblinking, which is creepy. But she was the one that drew the thread out to its proper length, and she decided how long the thread should be, which was how long each life should be, and what trials and or blessings it would contain. Then comes Atropos, and she was the inevitable. She was the oldest. She was very stern. She was silent, and she was unmovable, which is so typical firstborn. Now, Atropos, she wielded the shears that cut the thread, which was, in essence, ending a life in an instant. Now, she was the one who decided if a life ended in old age, if a life ended in battle, if a life ended by misfortune or accident. That was her deal. She got to decide that. Now, their work was not emotional. It was not unkind. It was not cruel. It was very much just kind of how the cookie crumbled. It just was what it was. They were not mean, they were not aggressive, they just were. They were the order that was written into the fabric of existence itself. So, every mortal, from the lowliest shepherd to the greatest king, received their thread. Now, heroes were not exempt, even the mighty. There was Achilles, whose thread burned very bright but very short. There was Heracles, also known as Hercules. Surely you've heard of Hercules. And he struggled endlessly under the burdens laid upon him. And then there was Oedipus, whose destiny was woven from prophecy from the very start, and all walked the paths the fates had already measured. And again, even the gods were not truly free. Zeus at times could delay outcomes, Apollo could warn people, Athena could guide people, but the Moirai, their decisions were absolute. Now, many gods attempted to sway the fates, but they usually had very little success. There was the story of Meleager. Now, when Meleager was born, the fates decreed he would live only as long as the log burning in the hearth. Now, his mother was like, oh my gosh. And so she's terrified. And she ends up snatching the log away from the flames and she hid it away. Now, Meleager, he grew into a warrior. But the moment his mother gave in to fury and returned the log to the fire, Atropos cut his thread and his destiny was fulfilled. Now, then there was the tale of Admetus. Now, this is the story of Apollo, who actually went to the fates and bargained for the life of a mortal king that he favored. Now, to everyone's astonishment, the fates actually agreed, but the only caveat was that somebody else would have to go in his place. Well, when the time came, it was actually his wife who stepped forward. She was the only one that would do it. Well, the Moirai didn't care. A deal was a deal, a bargain was a bargain, and it was already set in stone. They had no pity. They did not say, oh no, she's so sweet. We got her. Never mind. They were like, it is what it is. So they granted the bargain and nothing more. Now, on rare occasions, Zeus would try to get involved. And in one myth, Zeus once weighed the fates of warriors on his golden scale. And even then, he could only watch the heavier fate pull downward, signifying a soldier's impending doom. Not even the king of gods could tilt destiny's balance. Now, the thing that makes the fates so haunting is their distance. They don't punish, they don't reward, they don't even judge. They simply decide when a story begins, how it unfolds, and where it ends. And to the Greeks, fate wasn't unfair. It was inevitable. It just was what it was. It was a rhythm woven into the cosmos. Life was just a thread, and every thread, no matter how brilliant, must eventually be cut. Now, the fates really do remind us that even in Greek mythology, the gods lived beneath something greater. There was a cosmic order that no one could escape. Whether life was long, short, joyful, or tragic, it was woven by Clotho, it was measured by Lachesis, and it ended by Atropos. Their story is a reminder of the ancient belief that destiny is woven long before we understand it, and that every life, no matter how powerful, is just one thread in a far greater tapestry. So cheers to the fates, and until next time, may your thread be long, may your path be steady, and your destiny kind. I will see you very soon.